Well, hello, and welcome to today's REF Town Hall, where we are discussing engagement and impact. We had a session on the contributions to knowledge and understanding updates last week that you can find online. And next week, we have a town hall on the strategy, people and research environment subprofile. My name is Hazel Corradi, and I am one of the REF Senior Policy and Engagement Advisors. And I'm joined by my colleague, if you want to introduce yourself.
Good morning. Yes, hi, I'm Rebecca Emmett. I'm another Senior Policy and Engagement Advisor.
And our colleague, Jonathan Piotrowski, will be joining us later for the questions. We are also delighted to be joined by two British Sign Language interpreters. Today's session is to talk through the guidance, which will take about half an hour, and we will have time for questions at the end. This session is being recorded and will be available on the REF website, and we aim to have it out later this week if we can. Please use the Q&A function to ask questions. And we know there will be more questions than we can cover today, but please still ask them. Even if we don't answer them today, we will take them away and provide further information later. Your questions are really important to us as they help us to understand where more clarification is needed. We are currently working towards the criteria phase with panels in the next few weeks, and we are planning further engagement with the sector, including with research managers. This will all feed into the final guidance, which we aim to publish in the autumn of this year. Over to you, Rebecca.
Thanks, Hazel. So I'm just going to run through a couple of brief overview slides. For those of you who have attended others of our town halls, these will be very familiar to you. I will not spend too much time on them, but for some of you, it might be new information. So just before we get into the details of the guidance itself, it's just important to talk about the REF in its own context, so what it is and how it operates. So I'd just like to highlight this morning that the REF is a UK-wide initiative that is owned and led by the 4 UK funding bodies, and you can see them listed out on the slide there. It plays an important role within the research system. It informs the allocation of around £2 billion a year of block grant funding, and through this, it provides the accountability for public investment in research activity across the UK. Now, the REF is something that continually evolves alongside the research system itself. The system is changing and the REF changes with it. But also, given the connection to the allocation of funding, we are very aware that the REF also drives behaviour and is therefore a significant policy instrument across the UK. So when we are talking about the REF, we have our principles and functions, and you can read them in full in the initial decisions publication, which is available on our website and was published in June 2023. And I just want to flag these 3 priorities that were developed through consultation with the sector in the lead up to this exercise, because they underpin a lot of the decision making that we do. So I'm going to focus in on that final box, number 3. The REF decision making should be driven by a desire for robustness in assessment outcomes, with a mindful of the impact of the system on research culture, and also ensuring that bureaucratic burden of the system is proportionate. Now, these 3 priorities are really a triangle of factors that have to be balanced against each other in all of the decisions that we make. So with every guidance, every town hall that we talk to you about the guidance, we think it's important to highlight that these are the things that we've been balancing in producing the guidance for the exercise. I'm going to hand over to Hazel for a little bit more detail on this particular guidance area.
So introducing the engagement and impact guidance. So we published the engagement and impact guidance module on the 10th of December last year. And this guidance updates the impact guidance from 2021. And within the REF, the engagement and impact subprofile captures the wider societal benefits created through research and provides accountability for public funds. Next slide, please. The new engagement and impact guidance balances the evolution of the previous exercise with maintaining continuity. There is much that is the same, as it was for REF 2021, but we're starting by pointing out a few of the key changes that we have made, and we'll go into more detail later. The most obvious change is the name of the subprofile has changed to engagement and impact. Although the focus is still on assessing impact, the name change reflects the additional encouragement in this guidance to include narratives of engagement where they can reinforce the claims for the reach and significance of the impact. There are also two key changes from the initial decisions. The first is that the 2-star quality threshold for underpinning research has been removed, both to ensure that we are not limiting the diversity in the underpinning research, but also to reduce the burden of assessing this within institutions. Secondly, again to reduce burden, the minimum number of impact case studies that needs to be submitted for the smallest unit is now 1. Finally, in REF 2029, we are celebrating the wider pool of staff who enable research, engagement and impact. Within the engagement and impact module, this takes the form of an additional space to list those who are not the underpinning researchers, but who have contributed to enabling the engagement and impact. Over to you, Rebecca.
Thanks, Hazel. So I'm just going to quickly cover some of the key definitions from the engagement and impact guidance before we go into the guidance in more detail. So firstly, the definition of impact, and I think it's important to flag immediately that this is an unchanged definition from REF 2021. So in short, impact is defined as an effect on, change or benefit to the economy, society, culture, public policy or services, health, the environment or quality of life beyond academia. So impact includes the reduction or prevention of harm, risk, cost or other negative effects. And you can see full details of this definition in the guidance, which is accessible online. You can also download it as a PDF. An additional work is going to be done during the criteria phase, and so over the next few weeks and months, to update the examples of impacts and indicators, and that work will be undertaken with the panels during this criteria phase and published later in the year. The second definition that I want to go through is the definition of engagement, because this is new for REF 2029. So engagement is defined as an interaction between an HEI and either a relevant group of individuals, groups, communities, organisations, the public, commercial partners or policymakers that is purposeful, responsible and context appropriate. And the important thing to stress is that although engagement has many meanings and contexts, here we're using it as a word for the activity that connects research to communities and publics that results in impact. But this connectivity isn't intended to imply a linear relationship. So engagement could be an activator or facilitator of research itself, which means that research is more impactful. It might be an activator or facilitator of impact from research, or some iteration of both, or an activity that is all three things at once. So it's a very wide sort of definition that we're presenting to you. We are also aware that not all impacts have an engagement strategy. Some impact is serendipitous or achieved without direct input from researchers. But where engagement is planned or otherwise has enhanced the reach or significance of the impact, we're really encouraging case study authors to include it as part of the narrative that they present. And very briefly, just want to flag the definition of underpinning research as well. So, as Hazel's mentioned, we have removed the 2-star threshold for underpinning research for REF 2029, but otherwise the definition remains consistent with REF 2021. And that the rationale for that was outlined originally in the initial decisions. But just to slightly unpack it, underpinned by means that the research made a distinct and material contribution to the impact that was taking place, such that the impact would not have occurred or would have been significantly reduced without the contribution of that research. So the key point is that the impact wouldn't have occurred, or the reach and significance would be much less without the underpinning research. And now I'm going to hand over to Hazel.
Thanks, Rebecca. So the assessment of engagement and impact. So as for impact in 2021, the engagement and impact subprofile will be worth 25% of the unit quality profile, and it will be solely assessed through impact case studies. And, as in 2021, impact case studies will be assessed against the criteria of reach and significance. Although the panels will be considering how engagement and responsible practices, where they have been included as part of the narrative, can be recognised as part of these criteria. And further detail will be published as part of the panel criterion working methods later in the year. The unit's approach to engagement and impact and how the case studies presented for engagement and impact reflect the wider activity of the unit, along with how engagement and impact are supported at both unit and institutional levels, will be part of the Strategy, People and Research Environment, or SPRE, sub-profile. And we are doing a town hall on that sub-profile next week. Next slide, please. The number of impact case studies a unit must submit is still banded per FTE, but this is now calculated from the volume measure for the unit in con FTE using the HESA staff record data submitted in 25-26 and 26-27. For more detail on the volume measure, please see the guidance or our previous town hall on the volume measure. We have adjusted the banding since 2021, and to reduce burden for the smallest units, we have created a new band of up to 10 FTE, which has the choice of submitting 1 or 2 case studies. And this is because we are aware that case studies can be a limitation for some small units. And so we want to offer the flexibility of only needing to submit 1. However, where only 1 case study is submitted, units and institutions should be mindful of any perceived reputational risk to individuals. Where small units have 2 case studies, we encourage them to submit both. In these cases, both will be scored and contribute equally to the quality profile. Next slide, please. So the eligibility period for impact case studies is complicated, as we did not want to lose any impact that occurred in the COVID extension in 2021 but might not have been submitted. Therefore, the main window for eligible impact for REF 2029 overlaps with that from REF 2021 and is from the 1st of August 2020 to the 31st of July 2028. But if your impact occurred in this overlapping part of the window between the 1st of August 2020 and the 31st of December 2020, and it was submitted as a case study in 2021, it cannot be resubmitted for this REF. But obviously, if this impact has continued since December 2020, it may be eligible to be submitted as a continued case study. The complexity of this window is because we considered that although some May units may have taken advantage of the COVID extension to create new case studies, other units may not have had time or decided to stick with the case studies that had been prepared earlier, and we didn't want to lose any of the impacts that occurred between August and December 2020 because there wasn't time to write them up. The period for underpinning research is still 20 years and continues up to the end of the submission year in 2028. Next slide, please. So continued case studies also seem to be slightly complicated, and the post-REF evaluation of case studies from 2021 showed that there was some confusion about what counted as a continued case study and when to tick the continued case study box. So we have added a few words to the guidance to clarify this. The idea is that if you have a case study you submitted in 2021 or even 2014, for which the underpinning research happened in or after 2008, and the impact that started within the eligible period for the REF it was initially submitted to has continued into this current REF period, such that you have additional evidence of impact in this REF period. This is a continued case study. And a continued case study will look similar to the previously submitted one. The underpinning research will be the same, and the impact will be of the same type, or mostly of the same type. Where it will differ is that there will be new evidence for the additional impact since 2021 to show that the impact has continued. Continued case studies need not bring originality because the previous excellent impact has continued, and originality is not one of the criteria. So for writing a continued case study, the focus of the effort can be on updating the evidence of impact for this REF period to show how the impact has extended or matured. So, if you have ongoing impact, when should it not be counted as a continuing case study? So, continuing impact should not be counted as a continuing case study if you have done further research that has extended the reach or significance of the ongoing impact, or the type of impact has changed. If either of these is the case, then this is not a continued case study. Obviously, if you have talked about related impact previously, then the initial underpinning research could still be talked about or included, but we would want to know more about the recent research and the new types of impact as well. Hope that's clarified that, and do ask if not. Over to you, Rebecca.
Thanks, Hazel. So I'm just going to run through briefly the eligibility of underpinning research outputs. So for underpinning research to be eligible, it needs to have been produced by staff who were at the institution at the time the research was being produced. It needs to align to the scope of the UOA it is being submitted to, and it needs to be produced during the period the 1st of January 2008 to the 31st of December 2028. It doesn't have to have been submitted to this or a previous REF as an output, but it might have been. And it's important to note that impact cannot be claimed for research that was produced by staff who are currently employed by an institution where that research was completed at a previous institution. So in that case, the previous institution can claim the impact for the research. However, the underpinning research can be produced by any staff employed at the institution and is not limited to those with an eligible employment relationship as it is defined for outputs in the Contributions to Knowledge and Understanding module. An eligible or outputs written by staff who were previously described as Category C in REF 2021. So that's staff who are employed at other institutions, but have research as part of their role and can demonstrate that their underpinning research activity was produced in or with the submitting unit. Those research outputs can be used as underpinning research for engagement and impact case studies. There are some areas where research outputs cannot, where research cannot be an underpinning research output, and they're summarised here. So these circumstances include underpinning research work that was solely authored by research students. That cannot be used for underpinning research. Underpinning research must not have been produced by individuals employed at other HEIs. So, for example, visiting professors. So they can be employed by other organisations, but not another HEI. And it cannot, as I've already mentioned, be produced by current members of the submitting unit before they joined the HEI looking to make the submission. I'm going to hand over to Hazel to talk about the case study template.
Yeah, the exciting bit we've all been waiting for. So the important message is that the format of the case study template has largely been retained from 2021. We have presented it slightly differently in the guidance for some practical reasons, and we've split the details for the template into two sections, the contextual information and the substantive content. And this slide summarises the contextual information. The important thing to note is that there is no word limit for any of these context sections. Contextual information in the impact case study shows that the case study meets the requirements around the timings of the research, the impact, and the employment of the staff creating the underpinning research. We are also providing space to recognise additional staff and roles who have contributed to the engagement or impact. The contextual information also includes the two sections that list the underpinning research references and sources to corroborate the impact. The number of references to underpinning research remains at 6, but the underpinning research, as we've said before, no longer needs to meet the 2-star quality threshold as was required in REF 2021. It only needs to meet the definition of research, and you can find this in section 5.4 of the Contributions to Knowledge and Understanding Guidance. We are encouraging underpinning research from the full spectrum of outputs from the output glossary. The output glossary is what used to be Annex K in 2021, and it's currently being updated with the REF Research Diversity Advisory Panel and the sub-panels for 2029, and will be published later this year. We are keeping the total number of sources that can be used to verify the evidence presented in impact case studies to 10, but we want to emphasise that this is a maximum and that more sources does not necessarily improve the case study. The sources are not routinely looked at by panels, and they are only used for audit to verify the claims in the impact case study narrative. The narrative itself should provide evidence to the reach and significance of the impact, and can include tables, graphs, and pictures that do not add to the word count. In particular, we encourage those using testimonials as sources only to seek one per organisation where possible, to minimise the burden for organisations needing to provide them. Similarly, a maximum of 5 individuals can be suggested as sources, but this is also a maximum, not a target. Next slide, please. So the template substantive content refers to the 3 sections that make the case for the impact: the summary of the impact, the underpinning research, and the details of the impact. For REF 2029, we are using a word limit rather than a page limit for these combined sections. The word limit has been chosen based on analysis of what the actual number of words used for these sections was within the 5 pages, and setting it just higher than the average. We appreciate that in some cases, institutions included more than the new word count last time. In fact, the range of word counts in 2021 was very large. And so by adding a word limit, we are wanting to create consistency and make the playing field fairer for everyone, and maybe also reduce the burden for institutions who felt compelled to write longer case studies. But the word limit is capped for the 3 sections combined, so there is flexibility to use more words where you need them most. The suggested word counts for each of these 3 sections are only suggested. The underpinning research and details of impact sections are the same as 2021, but we are acknowledging and specifically encouraging the discussion of engagement strategies and activities that enable the impact, including any responsible practices that sustained or enhanced the engagement or the impact. These aspects do not require discussion if not relevant, for example, in the case of serendipitous impact, but did feature in many excellent impact case studies from 2021. And so we are making this choice of narrative element explicit in the guidance. Engagement that has enhanced the reach or significance of the impact can be discussed in either the underpinning research section or in the details of impact section. Please only write about it once to save words, and put it in the most relevant section to the story that you are telling. And feel free to use more of the combined word count for the section that you put it in as necessary. Over to you, Rebecca.
Thanks, Hazel. So I'm just very briefly going to talk about confidential impact case studies, and this is fully addressed within the guidance, but just to summarise, that HEIs should have confidence to submit impact case studies that include confidential information with prior agreement from the relevant organisations that they have been working with. Just to reassure, and as with last time, confidential impact case studies will only be shared with the REF team and those involved in the assessment process. So all members of that process are bound by confidentiality agreements. So there's reassurance there for anybody looking to submit confidential impact case study. And panel criteria to be published after the criteria phase will fully address the procedures for confidential material later in the year. Would just flag as well that advance permission must be sought to submit impact case studies that have a government security classification, and full guidance on that element of the confidential impact case studies will be published as part of the special requests guidance later on in the year. So watch this space. And finally, I just want to very briefly talk about additional impact case study data requirements. So as with REF 2021, the funding bodies would like to collect grant data for externally funded research in order to evaluate the role of this research activity in terms of producing impact. And this data will not be used for assessment. That's important to flag up front. But the analysis of this data for 2021, if you're interested, is in the data enhancement and analysis of the REF 21 impact case studies report conducted by research organisation RAND. The data requirements are the same as in REF 21, but there has been a change. The Global Research Identifier of Funders, GRID, has now become the Research Organisation Registry, or ROR. Otherwise, the name of funders, name of funding programme, grant numbers, etc., have remained unchanged from REF 2021. So that is the end of the kind of formal overview of the engagement and impact guidance. Thank you very much for your time this morning. I'd just like to flag that if you aren't already signed up for the REF updates, you can get them straight into your inbox by scanning this QR code now and signing up online. And that way you'll get any updates and any information that we've added to the website, you'll get a notification of that direct to your email. You can also visit the Get Involved page on our website to view current opportunities to engage with us. And as Hazel mentioned at the beginning, we are aware we possibly will not get through all of the questions today, but please do keep asking them. You can email us at info@ref.ac.uk if you have any further questions, or if questions arise, or if you have suggestions about how we might improve our guidance and make it clearer. I'm going to take these slideshows down now so that we can see the interpreters more clearly and start the Q&A.
Thank you. Thanks for that overview. I just wanted to quickly pick up on one of the questions about the format of these, and I totally appreciate that there is a lot of appetite for questions that we can't quite fit in today. But this will not be your only opportunity. We will be planning more engagement sessions and more chances to put your questions to the team. And as Rebecca says, we've got the mailbox for anything that you need to know in the meantime. So I'll move on to the rest of the Q&A now. So our first one was, does the REF open access policy apply to in-scope outputs which underpin impact case studies?
That's a really good question.
I was feeling I should know the answer.
They don't, underpinning research does not have to have been published in line with it doesn't have to meet the criteria for the CKU guidance. So I'm going to confirm by checking the guidance myself to make sure that I know the answer. And while I'm riffing, Jonathan, I don't know if you have anything you want to add on that.
It is not something that we've put a requirement in for, and unless someone tells me otherwise, no, I don't think that is the case. It's not a submitted output.
Yeah.
for assessment.
I think so.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if this would be similar. So the next question I had was, if the underpinning research is ineligible because the person was made compulsorily redundant, is the impact case study also ineligible?
So, as I mentioned in the information about eligible underpinning research, the CKU guidance does not apply to the underpinning research outputs for impact case studies. So it's not that is for outputs that are submitted. So I think what's being referred to is a pre-publication substantive link where the output cannot be submitted because the person was made compulsory redundant. I would flag that that output would never have been eligible to be underpinning research because the person wasn't employed at this HEI at the point where that output was published, which is the sole requirement for research to be eligible to underpin a research, an impact case study. In terms of the timing, the person needs to have been employed at the time. So I understand the reference, but that's not relevant guidance for this scenario.
Thank you. Next question, are the definitions for 4-star, 3-star, are they likely to change to include engagement processes?
The panels will be publishing their criteria later this year, and they haven't started discussing this yet. So they may make updates, but we can't really say until the panels have discussed what they are wanting to do.
Yeah,
Anyone else want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I just add, we indicated in the guidance that we've asked the panels to look at the assessment criteria of reach and significance in relation to engagement and responsible practice. Yeah, I guess that's the way that we're going into the criteria phase meetings, but we wouldn't want to preempt the panel's work there.
Thank you. I don't know how much you know about how the submission system will work at this point, but we've had a few questions about how the E&I data needs to be uploaded, and yeah, there's something in the guidance about it being uploaded directly. Could you tell us a bit about that change?
What we can say, sorry.
No, Hazel, please.
Is that we are working with the systems team to find good and practical ways to upload impact case studies to the system. Some of it will definitely be a direct input. There may also be a template, but we will publish that information as soon as we have finalised with systems what the submission system will look like.
Thank you. Will impact case studies be penalised if they do not include engagement? And could you clarify, if they do need to include it, what proportion of the impact case study should cover engagement?
I do one of my characteristically short answers of no, they will not be penalised if they don't include engagement. But if they wish to include engagement, they are very welcome to. This is an acknowledgement of the fact that a lot of impact case studies in previous exercises have talked about engagement. People weren't sure if they could or not. And so this is a very explicit of, yes, you can talk about it. It is not, it will not be penalised if you don't, but we would encourage you to think about talking about it if it has had, as discussed in the slides, it has had an impact on the reach and significance of the impact overall. Hazel, Jonathan, is there anything else you'd want to add on that?
I would just say that the proportion to talk about it will depend on how far it has supported the reach and significance of the impact. So it will be exactly to do with the story that you are telling about how your impact has come about. And so if engagement strategy has been a strong part of that, we would expect you to write more. But if it's just been a small bit, then you write a small amount, that's also fine. So it's all about telling the good story of how your impact has good reach and significance.
I just add my 2 pence worth as well. That's that's all right. Yeah, I think I just wanted to reflect on the policy deep dive we did around this, and when we were talking about how these engagement and responsible practices might feature in this assessment element. And I think the general sense was we want to create the space, additional space in the exercise to recognise excellence in these areas, and I think that's that's why we've asked the panels to think about how they might feature in the assessment criteria, and why it's not detrimental, or there's a required ratio of discussion of these features in impact case studies. And I think we heard in those deep dives that there were many excellent impact case studies in 2021 that did discuss engagement, and that really strengthened those impact case studies. So we wanted to kind of give recognition to that and encourage that in this exercise.
Thank you. There was a question about the number of case studies as relates to FTE, which that table was published in the initial decisions. And somebody's asking, is it fair if a unit of 59 FTE submits only twice as many case studies as a unit of 19 FTE? And could you tell us a bit about how those numbers were reached?
Yes, so there was some streamlining of the boundaries for the number of case studies, and this was for practical reasons to reduce burden for panels at the top end where large units are submitting many, and this was seen as reasonable because the evaluation of the case studies from last time suggests that large units tend to submit excellent case studies, however many we ask them to submit. And so there isn't a limitation to the robustness of the exercise from doing this. Does anyone else want to add to that?
Thank you. So the next question is, how should the REF impact eligibility requirement for a distinct and material contribution to research be interpreted, where collective research is genuinely co-led and co-produced by researchers from the same discipline across 2 different HEIs?
So that is addressed within the details of the impact guidance. So it talks, the guidance talks about where the wider body of research that contributed to the impact was a research collaboration, that impact case study ought to identify the particular contributions of that submitting unit's research and acknowledge other key contributions, but base the impact case study on the work that was done by the researchers within that unit of assessment. So that's in section 10. Is there anything else, Jonathan or Hazel, that you would add to that?
I mean, so the question is saying that two institutions genuinely collaborate on everything. Is that? I mean, then that I guess that needs to be what's stated as the circumstance of that particular impact case study, and explaining, that the contribution was shared across all the activity, if that's the case.
Thank you. Does the underpinning research, where this is in the form of a research output, need to meet the same eligibility requirements for a substantive link as research outputs submitted through CKU?
No.
Right.
Sorry, Hazel.
No, it's in chorus.
Thank you. Okay, can you clarify what preferred means within the requirement that only one testimonial per organisation is preferred? The use of language such as preferred adds ambiguity to the rules and only encourages HEIs to act in a cautious manner that may result in some impacts not being submitted to REF.
So this is not supposed to be a limitation. So the sources are there for audit to verify the claims made in the study. So they're sort of there as a backup reference to say, yes, we're not making this up, basically. But what we have heard is that in the past, some organisations, and this will not be all of them, which collaborate with many academics, are bombarded with asks for testimonials from, I guess, impact authors who are concerned that they need to have 10 sources and 5 testimonials, etc. And this creates a lot of burden for those organisations. And so what we are suggesting, and it isn't a hard or fast rule, which is why we've said preferred, is just that to think sensibly about what testimonial will verify the case that you are making. And if one good, thorough testimonial will do that, then submitting one is absolutely fine. There may be reasons why you might want more than one from an organisation. So maybe you've worked with 2 different parts of an organisation, or the organisation has worked with more than one of the researchers to do something, and there's genuinely different things to say, then that's fine. What we want to discourage is people feeling they need to just collect testimonials to make up the number of sources, especially if they're asking people who don't actually have knowledge of the impact. They're just suitable names in a list. Does anyone else want to add to that?
No.
Or me.
Thank you. Is a concern about word count and repetition. If impact case studies authors need to include engagement practices and responsible practices in a case study, doesn't that risk replicating what should be in the SPRE statement?
So it shouldn't, in that the impact case study is being asked to about these 2 elements, the engagement practice and responsible practices, in relation to this specific impact case study, and particularly where this is impacting the reach and significance of the impact. So it's a very tailored, focused discussion that's being encouraged here, whereas obviously in SPRE it's a wider discussion of the approach and practices across the UOA's activity. So they are asking slightly different things in those 2 areas. And again, if engagement does not have to be included in impact case studies and responsible research practices if it is not relevant to the reach and significance of that impact case study. So it's a choice that can be made when writing those impact case studies. Did anybody want to add anything on that, Jonathan or Hazel?
Nothing from me.
I was just going to say, the SPRE will be asking about the unit's approach and the institution's approach. So whereas as you said, Rebecca, anything you write in the impact case study is specifically making a case for that piece of impact.
Thank you. How likely do you think it is that panel deliberations will change the assessment criteria as concerns that this feels very close to the end?
Sorry, I can't see if anybody's going to answer. So
I was going to just say that the criteria are remaining as reach and significance, and the panels are reviewing these in the same process as been used for previous refs in a similar timescale, as far as I'm aware.
And just to add again that the emphasis is on creating additional space in the exercise to recognise excellence as it occurs, and the intention is that an impact case study may not discuss engagement or responsible practices and still receive and be viewed as high quality by the panel. So I guess as additional space, it should take away that risk, and it just gives opportunity for more further demonstration of excellence rather than shifting the goalposts necessarily.
Thank you. And when can we expect to receive the case study template?
Well, we are currently working with systems to look at the capabilities of the submission system, as I said before, and we don't have a date but we will make it available if required as soon as possible.
Thank you. And if a researcher has undertaken work prior to joining the submitting HEI, as well as building on that work that has led to impact during their time at the submitting HEI, could or should all of this research be included in the underpinning research, or should only the research published at the submitting HEI be included in the underpinning research references section? Sorry, I ran out of voice at the end of that one.
Oh, don't worry, I was reading along with you. I was wondering when you were going to breathe. So for underpinning research to be eligible, it needs to have been produced at the HEI that is putting forward the impact case study. So the research outputs that were published during the period that this researcher was employed by the HEI should be the underpinning research. I will defer to Jonathan and Hazel, but I think I am right in saying that you could still include that as a source for the impact case study, but it wouldn't be the underpinning, or outputs produced before that person was employed could still be included as a source, but would not be under the underpinning research that would be submitted. But I will defer to Hazel and Jonathan.
Go on, Hazel, sorry.
I was going to say, I think it's probably best talked about in the underpinning research section as context, rather than claimed as underpinning research, because it doesn't come from the institution. But the previous institution, as long as the most recent research has made a significant difference to the impact, then the new institution can claim that research. But if the previous research also made a significant effect on the impact, then they could also claim it too.
Yeah. And just to add to that, I think it's as with Ref 2021, it was about the research undertaken at the institution that's submitting, and how that research in that period made a material and distinct contribution to the impact claim. So I think that's the key point there. That's my understanding.
Thank you. Could you confirm that rigour has been laid down as an assessment criteria?
Rigour is not an assessment criteria for engagement and impact. What we have done with that suggestion from the initial decisions, we discussed it at the engagement and impact deep dive, and what we decided was important was the value of discussing responsible practices in relation to engagement and impact. But this is not a criteria. It's just, along with engagement, something that we are encouraging people to talk about if relevant.
Yeah, I think that's right. We kind of drilled down into what, how we could conceptualize rigour, and I guess the views of the expert views that were part of that policy deep dive is that it does revolve around those kind of responsible practices. And I suppose there was a question about if you incorporate it as a assessment criterion, then how does that apply across the board? But we did also want to kind of make sure, we did want to recognise that it is an important and I think probably a growing kind of feature of the research system. And so we've taken this sort of balanced approach to it.
Thank you. Can you give examples of responsible practices and perhaps what also might be considered irresponsible?
Can pick up briefly. So responsible research practices, it's ethical behaviours and engaging with external partners, individuals, groups, etc., in an ethical and responsible way, and thinking about the impact that the activity that you're doing will have on those groups and communities. So there's an awful lot of material out there on responsible and ethical engagement with communities, so that it's not exploitative, does not leave people sort of worse off than they were when the impact or the engagement and activity and impact generating activity was started. Does anybody want to add anything to that?
I think responsible practices will depend very much on the types of impact being pursued, as well as the nature of the underpinning research. And so we may also talk to the panels about disciplinary differences in this area, but we hope to, when we publish the updated version of what was Annex A of the panel criteria last time with the examples of impact and engagement, then some of those things may be foregrounded there as well.
Thank you. Another question that's been asked in a few ways with lots of upvotes is about clarity on the use of tables, graphs and pictures. And I think that there's a concern there might be a temptation to up your content by using graphs and tables. So will there be any restrictions on those to stop people expanding their word count through their use?
It's a good question. I think this is something I will take into our discussions with systems as to how best to collect the data. The point of allowing tables and graphs and pictures is to give people the opportunity to present their story in the best way, and not to find ways of sneaking in a discussion by just putting it in a table. That would be inappropriate.
Thank you. And can we combine similar evidence sources? So, for example, a combined collection of, sorry, I've got an email notification coming up over my question I'm reading. Sorry. So, can we combine similar evidence sources? For example, a combined collection of media articles highlighting a research achievement as a single evidence source?
That is a very good question. But I confess not knowing the answer to, so I'm going to have to defer to Jonathan or Hazel.
I think people can combine things within sources. Sources can be links, or they can be things that can be uploaded. And sometimes they could be things that need to be described because they're not electronic in format. As I said, the point of the sources is to audit the truth of the narrative statements that you're writing. And so our aim is not to prevent you from putting in any source that would verify the truth of your claims. We are just asking people to take a proportional approach to that.
Yeah. I think that's it. I think it's where it's an appropriate way of presenting, related evidence items. I think just kind of the way the work was in 2021. But I do wonder whether there are quite a few questions I can see around the kind of like formatting side of things, and I do wonder whether we might think about providing some additional clarity in that kind of area generally, perhaps.
Thank you. Can you explain why there is any case for identifying continuing case studies? Surely these will be clear from the context of the case study and there will be no need to identify.
The continuing case study tick box is there for, well, one of the main things it was used for last time was for the post-ref evaluations that went into the RAND report on the case studies, which also flagged its inconsistency in its use. We do give the option to panels as to know whether things are continued case studies or not. Last time, only panel A, I think, wanted to know whether case studies were continued, but I think it was important to panel A last time. So that is one reason. Obviously, we will be asking the panels this time, and then their views on that will be in the panel criteria.
Thank you. And how does REF view impacts arising from emeritus and honorary academics and from new research undertaken under those contract types?
It's a good question. Sorry, Hazel.
Yeah, well, I was going to, I mean, so people have to be employed at the time that the underpinning research was done. We don't specify the type of contract. Does anyone else understand that differently?
No, it's a broader set of requirements rather than sort of employment type. It's working at, isn't it? The institution with a contract in place. So I guess, and I understand that the ways that emeritus professorships are kind of set up just varies massively across the sector. So I think in all cases would refer people to those kind of rather on a case-by-case basis, but looking at those kind of rules set out under the underpinning research kind of requirements to see whether their particular instance meets those requirements. So I don't think there's a blanket answer on that one, is my long-winded answer.
Okay, so next question, somebody's asked, so carrying out research is the important criterion rather than publication per se. So I guess the question there is, can the impact be based on research that's not necessarily published? Or would you understand that differently?
There needs to be evidence of the research, which is usually some form of publication. Obviously, for confidential outputs, or that, you know, they are not published in a traditional sense, and impact can be based on those, in which case what we count is the date which the research was made available to the people who required it. So I don't know if that sheds light on thinking something else is required for this answer, if anyone else wants to chip in.
So I would just flag that as sort of mentioned in the guidance, that the underpinning research, it might be a body of research activity, but it needs to have a reference to one or more key research outputs. So it needs to be something that can be pointed to as a reference point. But as Hazel has flagged, that might be a confidential output that was made available to a body on a confidential basis. So in that sense, wouldn't be in the wide public domain, but would be available to the person who commissioned it. But it's a good question, and maybe we need to reflect on tightening the language or putting some clarification in.
Yeah, we do say brought into the public domain during the window, the 20-year window. So I guess that's the current wording. But it sounds like there'll be some more detailed questions around what constitutes being brought into the public domain.
Thank you. One final question. How are we making sure that small UOAs are not being disadvantaged, especially those that don't have two ICS of equal quality and who might therefore decide to submit only one?
Do you want me to go on that, or?
Sure,
Yes.
if you want. I was just collecting my thoughts, but
as I've started talking, I might as well carry on. Yeah, I mean, the option is with the each individual submitting unit, and I think they have control over that. You know, we did hear somebody can submit one or two for less than up to 9.99 FTE. So I think that's in the control of the institution, really. So I mean, I've heard people say that. We've heard some concerns about, you know, I suppose if there's one impact case study, concerns about implications for the author or the involved kind of individuals. So we wanted to make sure we give some protection around that, and yeah, it's down to submitting institutions to make that decision about about their particular circumstance. So I think it's flexibility, and hopefully that provides choice for institutions in the way they approach things. Is there anything you wanted to add, Hazel, to that? See, we're over time.
That's what I was going to say. Exactly.
Great. Thank you, everyone. We'll have to leave it there. We will, as we say, be publishing the recording of this and taking all your questions away to inform our thinking. And there will be more from us in time. So thank you very much for today and take care.
Thanks.
Cheerio.
And thank
Bye.
you very much to our interpreters as well, who've done an excellent job throughout. So thank you. Take care. Bye.